Hello, everyone. My name is Missy McCormick. I'm Senior Director of People Strategy here at the Select Group. Thank you for joining us today. As we celebrate Pride Month, we are committed to fostering allyship and inclusion at TSG, where people feel safe. And to further inclusion, we are officially launching our Pride and Ability ERG for our employees to build community and support and to drive more education and awareness around this identity. We also welcome Ashley T Brundage to facilitate a workshop on empowering differences today. Ashley is a former diversity, equity, and inclusion executive, an author, founder, and president of Empowering Differences, a board member of GLAD, and I have to mention that Ashley has over 50 events this month alone, and an upcoming event as a speaker with American Airlines. So we are humbled to have her here with us today. We'll be recording this session and there will be opportunities to share and use the chat, so please do so. Ashley, thank you for being here, and I'll let you take it from here.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be joining you, and I'm coming to you live from New Orleans. And if you were here in our pre-gathering meeting, our pre-meeting meeting, I was talking about the vibe and the culture here in New Orleans, and apparently I've learned to say it right. So it's not New Orleans, but yes, the Society for Human Resources Management Conference was this week, and it was a great time with culture and food and connectivity and people. And what I loved this week was the opportunity to talk a lot about empowerment, and now today with you all we get to do that together. And to make it together, let's do this foundationally, and let's see if we can figure out what everyone's knowledge level is on empowerment, because I know that that's a pretty interesting topic to talk about. So why don't we take a moment and rate our own knowledge level on empowerment. So if you're feeling so inclined, take a second, click the little button. There's no, 0 would probably be a bad answer, so it's not listed. But it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. 5 being the expert, and then 1 is, hey, I really want to learn some more. So go ahead and make a selection, do that, and while you're doing that, I will go ahead and start talking about this concept of empowering your differences, which is, of course, a 4-step process to drive impacts for everyone through our differences that we hold. And we're going to talk about the 10 differences. We're going to talk about the empowering actions that you can do as a leader. All of those are going to drive more empowerment for people. And as we're moving throughout the day, let me see if my clicker decides to work. There we go. Let's have an icebreaker first to get us started, really get you thinking about empowerment. And this is where I'm going to ask you to use the chat box. Oh, and we do have some poll results. So the poll results are in, it looks like 53% say some knowledge, 16% somewhat low, very low, 11%, 21 is a good bit of knowledge, and no one clicked the expert button. That's really amazing. Usually you might find one person who's like, I should be teaching this, but nonetheless, I don't even think I would put a 5. Okay, so let's level set there. All right. So I'm going to present a scenario to you, and the first feeling that you get, I want you to put that in the chat. And in this scenario, you don't have any money or access to money or any kind of way to purchase goods or services. You also do not have any identification in your name. You also do not understand the language being spoken around you. So hopefully you're going in the chat, and I guess I could press a button and see what the chat's saying. Let's see. Let's click that button. And there you go. So what exactly, right? we're starting to feel a lot of fear, right? And stress, nervous. I see that one. I'm going to add one more thing to this. You don't understand the language, you don't have any money, you don't have identification, and you also don't have this device. And for those that don't know, what I'm holding in my hand is my cell phone. All right. I'm betting that that's probably not good stuff. I see a lot of stuff coming in the chat, so thank you all for participating in the exercise. But wow, there's a lot going on behind this question. Well, I want you to think about, let's take our example one step further. And let's just imagine we still have no money, no cell phone, no identification, and you also don't understand the language being spoken around you. And then in that moment, what I'd like you to do is just imagine you walk up to a building and then you see this sign on the building. What are you feeling now? Now, if you work at TSG, hopefully you're gonna maybe like be able to phone a friend, look up your employee record. If it's not a brand that you've heard from, now you want to know a little bit more, maybe you might be able to find someone to help you, or maybe relief. I see that in the chat. Relief is a good thing. Welcoming. Okay, so all of those, some of those things you can draw just from seeing a logo. Well, in the LGBTQ plus community, right, we have all these different variations of pride flags. Here's a standard Roy G. Biv one, waving in the wind. That has the same kind of feeling, seeing those imageries. This is why people put backgrounds. We were talking about that earlier, about the virtual pride background can be really powerful. It sends a message to other humans, right? How about these signs also send messages like that around language access or physically accessing a building? All of those have something in common. They all have inclusion in common. And remember that inclusion is a form of empowerment. You can do inclusion, you can practice it, you can showcase it, and then ultimately someone can gain empowerment from your inclusion action. All right, so now we've done our exercise. We have a goal for today, and this goal is centered around connecting your time here to draw on to something that will ultimately equal leadership. Leadership is the overarching topic of empowerment. Leaders choose to empower other people, thus guiding their principles and navigating them in this world. We sometimes call that mentorship. We sometimes call that a lot of things. It's empowering actions is what we call it here, and empowering differences. Now, we're going to get there through a few things on our agenda today. Number one, we're going to talk about the 4-step empowerment process and what that is and what is empowering your differences. We're going to talk about the actions that are found in the last step of the process, which there are 10, but we only have time to really vet out 3 of them for our webinar today. But we're going to talk about inclusion, so we'll have an exercise that we'll be doing together. They'll be thinking about how you're going to contribute to that, because we want your active engagement on that exercise as well. We're going to dive into access as an action, and then we'll wrap up with empower as an action. All right, so let's do these 4 empowerment steps that I've been teasing you long enough about. Step 1 is to know yourself. And when you take the moment to start assessing your own level of empowerment, which is literally why we asked that question at the first, rating your knowledge level on empowerment, the self-assessment is designed to help you by answering open-ended questions that will curate your thought process to your comfort zone. Now, you'll find the link for the self-assessment in the chat, but you can also access it if you happen to have your treasured resource of your cell phone. You could take a picture of it and it will connect you to the access to download the self-assessment. Now, the self-assessment will, like I mentioned, be open-ended questions that you hold on to yourself. I don't collect any of that information around what you answer. You hold on to that because only you will be able to decide what is empowering and what is not empower, what is disempowerment, right? You have to make that decision. Someone else can't necessarily tell you what is empowering. That is your decision to make. That's really important. So that's why you have to ask yourself questions around what you view as empowering and how you connect with other humans through empowerment. That will lead you to step 2 in this process, which is to connect it to other humans. You got it. Knowing others is step 2. And the best way that I can help you to know others is maybe to share a little bit about me. And I, as you may have guessed it, was the D&I person for a lot of years at PNC Bank, cultivating inclusion for the organization. But I didn't always have that job. I actually worked for 12 years in the restaurant industry, and I was in charge of helping people grow their career and career development and leadership. And so some people call it HR function. I often say that I would provide resources for humans because it's much nicer. It doesn't carry a negative connotation. So then I lost my job. I lost my job in 2008, largely because I was not being authentic. And unauthentic employees do not produce at the same rate of authentic employees. And I was literally a study for that. And this process of losing my job was probably the best thing that ever happened to me in that moment, because it really forced me to look at how I fit in the world. And I started to ask myself open-ended questions around empowerment. And it's actually what prompted me to create the empowerment self-assessment that you've had a chance to download. Now, what I found was that I needed to have access to lots of resources to get myself out of the hole that I had dug myself, and losing my job and losing the house, and then not having a place to live and not really knowing where we were going to find the next meal. It forced me to examine my social economic class difference, because I kind of had moved along a privileged world, but then literally losing everything had made me think about, wow, I didn't even think that that was like part of the world, that there were people that didn't have access to treasured resources. And then I started thinking, wow, okay, well, I want to build myself back up, and how is I going to do that? Well, for me, it needed to be gaining employment. Gaining employment was going to be how I could survive in the world. And I started going to job interviews, and then I realized that in that time frame, 2009, 2010, based on my experience level and having never gone to college, I was really setting myself up for an entry-level position again and having to work my way back up the corporate ladder. So then I said, wait a minute, if I'm going to start at the bottom making $9 an hour, I'm at least going to be me and just be one person and live one life, because I was living a double life before and not telling anyone about my transgender status, which is, of course, one of my 10 most common differences. And so those differences is what I started to study, and I realized that I needed to overcome, and that's why I was so centered around trying to find.
Wait, hold on. Ashley, you're muted.
All right, how about now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So what was I saying? Oh, yes. So empowerment steps 1 and 2. So I focused on knowing myself and then getting to learn about other people in the world. And the other part was the looking into the differences that we have as humans, but much deeper than that, because I needed to be able to encapsulate what difference I held on to and the buying power it had for someone to get out of their way and say, wow, maybe we should bring someone like Ashley on the team. And so steps 1 and 2 got me a job as a part-time bank teller at PNC Bank. Then I started learning and growing and getting involved in DEI. I was joining all the employee groups. So thank you for joining an employee group and being a part of these employee groups, because it's so important in getting your ability to connect to know others. That's the whole framing there. It's your opportunity to learn about a culture or a community that you know nothing about. The first employee group that I joined was the AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander employee group, and I learned so much. I didn't even know that when I walked in, I was going to learn about the Asian financial markets, and I was blown away. I got so much additional value and knowledge just from one presentation that I attended. And so that's an opportunity that you have that you can gain by connecting with others through empowerment. And that led to me uncovering a new step in this process, which was to develop your strategy. And developing your strategy is really important for empowerment, because what ends up happening is sometimes one or multiple of your differences can sometimes be the thing that you get known for. I don't know if that's ever happened. Pigeonholed for something that makes you unique. You can agree, you can disagree, you can give me an emoji. That happens. I somehow became the transgender professional, and I was like, wow, that's being trans is not a profession, and I had to kind of reframe that. And so that's why develop your strategy is so important. So I established a differences assessment to help you build your own strategy in relation to your differences. Which differences to empower in what setting, based on knowing which ones have a privilege and which ones have a disprivilege in that moment to yourself, for yourself. And the differences assessment, which once you download it, you'll have a chance to check this out. This activity, you can do this together, you can do this now, I suggest that you really take time to reflect when you are asking yourself the question in relation to these 10 differences. Now, I've been teasing them enough, but here they are, the 10 differences that I researched, a part of empowering your differences and empowering others' differences. Is why it's just called empowering differences. These 10 differences all impact lots of things. Now, you may be thinking there might be some that are on here or some that are missing. Well, some of them are packaged in with learned abilities or education, or the things that make you who you are as a part of your attributes, which connects to abilities. So there's some connected pieces to this as well. And yes, there very well could be other differences as well, but these were the ones that I researched. But ultimately, as you're navigating through deciphering whether you have a privilege or a disprivilege in relation to these differences, that's your choice to make. It's important to know that no one can turn around and tell you that you have a privilege or a disprivilege. You have to decipher that. And then you need to use this knowledge of whether or not you need to gain access to more empowerment, or do you need to provide access to more empowerment for someone else? And that's the moment that you'll start to realize that that's what really makes this model empowering to others, is that opportunity to use what makes you as a unique person on this planet and build strategy around that. The other thing that I want you to start thinking about strategically is the actions. Now, the 10 empowering actions all connect empowerment to each action that you do. And we're going to obviously talk a lot about empowerment when we get to the empower section, but just remember to look for those moments that you can impact other humans. And those moments will be who typically lives in that space. All right, so the 10 actions, here they are. I've been teasing them enough, but this is the 10 actions. Now, you'll notice that they're in a specific numeric order. I'll tell you that the numeric order is the way in which I use them. What's fun about this is that you have the ability to prioritize them based on your own difference makeup, which is why it's important to do the differences assessment. And then you'll start to realize which ones need the most empowerment and then which ones drive empowerment faster. If you get a chance to read my book, chapter 20 will give you all of the secret takeaways in relation to the prioritization of the 10 actions, because they're based on the research that I did with the research panel that I formed, hence my knowing others moment in time. That was literally filling a room of people who I wanted to learn about their expertise, and I got a chance to share my expertise, and together we did the empowerment research that you'll find as Empowering Differences. Now, the intersection or intersectionality, right, of one thing to another, Kimberly Crenshaw, right, coined this phrase intersectionality around all the things that sometimes make you different, but ultimately, which one is it that's addressing in that moment? And I want you to think about which actions you're going to prioritize as you move throughout your time with Empowering Differences. These 10 actions are both empowerment with the action. And you have to be able to isolate what the empowerment is. And that would be something, right? Authority and power. We're going to talk about that more, but just think about that. Okay. So the first action that we're going to talk about as a group, we're going to touch on inclusion, and I'm going to lay a little bit of foundation and then we're going to do our activity. So if you're excited to kind of maybe share something about what you do to drive inclusion, I'm going to give you a little teaser. That's kind of where we're going to go. So start thinking about that, what that might be. First thing, inclusion is culture. So give you a thought here, but I do think we have another poll question coming your way here in a moment. And as you get a chance to do that poll, I want you to think about culture, because culture is happening in every single moment of every single day. So here's your poll question. Who contributes to the culture in your organization? Is it executives? Is it employees? Is it customers? Or is it everyone? You know, this is one of those poll questions that typically does have a right and a wrong answer, maybe, but it is based on your perspective, though, too. So think about that. Go ahead and take the poll. And so as we're talking about culture, the organizational culture, your community, your own personal contribution to culture, all of those things connect to driving culture or shaping it. It's not just any one person. It's everything that happens in every moment of every day. Things that are written down on paper, the painting on the wall, all of those things can start to contribute towards culture. If you remember when I did my opening activity, I talked about signs, and you saw just a sign. And the sign said that someone speaks the same language that you speak, or the sign said that you could access the building. Those are examples of culture driving items that ultimately someone gathered something from that. All right, so it looks like we're pretty on the same page here with choosing everyone. Yes, and so yeah, you got that one right. Thank you. Thanks for participating in that. But a good way to also check your culture that you contribute, because each individual contributes to culture. Everyone owns it. Okay, it's not just Missy's job. Okay, so a 360 review panel is a good idea of a way to shape your own culture, to find out exactly what you're bringing to an organization, to a relationship. And I always recommend, if you're ever going to do a 360 review panel, that you do it with in mind that you gather all stakeholders that you connect with on a day-to-day basis. Because if you're having a bad day about what's happening in your personal life, guess what happens, right? That can boil over to the organization in a meeting. So remember that when you do a 360, it has to connect to other people outside in all your different spheres. All right. Now, inclusion is also belonging. Belonging is a part of inclusion, and it's all about that connected feeling that you get from interacting with other humans on this planet. It's also the impression that you make with someone. It's usually something that happens right away, where you can kind of get a sense if you should be here or not. It's kind of that feeling that's going on. Belonging is all about wanting to be a part of a group. And sometimes if you want to be a part of a group, you have to have that feeling of belonging. And you can get that in a lot of easy ways. And I want you to be thinking about how you can connect that feeling and help people feel they belong. But it is just that a lot of times it's that immediate feeling. Like me seeing that rainbow background, now I know that I belong and I'm in the right space. So someone helped me feel belonging as well from that moment. Now, I will tell you, my favorite thing about belonging is making sure you are memorable, because you want to come top of mind when you connect with someone else. That's going to cultivate belonging faster. And being memorable is very, very purposeful. It's a lot different than being remembered. I challenge you to look at the definition for each of those words and then let me know which one you want to be chosen as. The power behind being memorable is top of mind. That's the biggest difference between those two words. Top of mind, forefront. Someone's immediately going to be thinking about you in that moment. And that's important because that's way more empowering. All right. Another topic in inclusion is representation. So important to speak out against exclusions, but to have that accountability for each other. If you see something that's not right, you have to say something, or you're going to be contributing to a non-exclusive environment. The moment we shut the door in a room and we don't have all the differences covered of opinions, then we need to make sure that we make a mental note to go outside of our four walls and gain another perspective, because perspective is literally where representation lives. It's in those moments that can drive consistency, and it also connects to all the brand development things that an organization does around showcasing its inclusion in marketing, graphics, flyers, things that you do around meeting with customers or clients. All of those things connect back to this moment around representation. All right, so this is a lot around inclusion. But remember, leadership is the overarching topic that we're talking about here around empowering differences. Leadership is the environment. It's the way that you engage with other people. It's the culture. It's the development of your peers. If you are an individual contributor and not a manager of people, you still contribute to the culture and you contribute towards other people's development. And that's the moment where you'll realize that you could be empowering to others. Time for our activity. I've been teasing it enough, but here we go. So inclusion activity. And if you want to be the first one, you could raise your hand and you can take a moment and you can share what you do to drive more inclusion through empowerment. So I don't know if we have any volunteers here. But I've been doing a lot of talking, so it would be really cool to hear from somebody else for a moment. What are you all thinking around this inclusion? And I'm going to give you some action steps in just a second, but do we have any hands raised, Missy?
I'm not seeing any yet, but I know there's a ton of people on this call that do a great job of furthering inclusion at the select group. So I encourage you to speak up. Yeah. I saw Tim noted in the chat being visible.
Love that one. That's good.
I guess my version, what I do, I just always like make myself available for people, or like maybe in social settings, if I see somebody by themselves, I'll go hang out with them and talk to them more.
Okay, I like that. That's good. So we're talking about the time element. Okay. What else does everybody else do?
This is Rocky. I can say like what I feel like helps me when I'm in a situation where I feel uncomfortable. Like if I walk in to a group setting and there's a lot of people that I don't know, I feel like the first person to come up, introduce themselves, like ask me things about myself, like I immediately calm down. So I think that just being the person to lead first, and I think that's really helpful.
I love that. Yeah, that's great.
I think as a leader, there's an opportunity to encourage and empower folks to join in on the conversation. And so asking somebody directly their opinion or their thought or how they might handle a situation. So letting them speak first before speaking first, right? So I think it's just generally tapping people on the shoulder could be an opportunity, right?
Yeah, it's good. We have a hand up. Donna.
Yeah. So, yeah, the last 3 companies I've been at, I've kind of been the only out visible trans non-binary individual, that I know of. And so, just to sort of echo some of the others, like, I think, a big thing is you need people to be visible. And I'm a little less so at home, but usually when at work, it's like it's hard for me not to be visible. So in terms of being memorable, I wind up being memorable also to a lot of people. But I think it's like other people need to be able to see that it's like this is okay. Like this is people like me are welcome at the company or wherever it is we are. And to that, I'm also very open about myself. I'm like, I'll spend a week talking to you about all of this stuff if you really want.
Yeah. No. It's totally cool.
I had a friend. I did three different lunch and learns with them privately. We went down at lunchtime, and it was kind of like, okay, so where were we? But there need to be. I know not everyone's going to want to do that, but there needs to be people who are willing to educate other people to sort of put themselves out there. I like to say to sort of demystify all of this.
So visibility and education are really, really important. Yeah, these are all really great ones. There were some ones that I was expecting I was going to hear. Who uses food to show inclusion? Anyone do that? Nobody uses food?
I love to cook, and I know Rocky on the call who spoke up is definitely a big cook.
Okay.
I was trying to put 1,000% yes in the chat. I wasn't fast enough.
Right. I mean, well, food is like one of the most culture building things that an organization can do. I know that when we did the pandemic, it was tough, right? Because a lot of times we weren't, and we're still a lot of people are hybriding. But being in the office and having a potluck. Why do you think potlucks were invented? It really wasn't like a save the money thing. It was more of an opportunity to introduce culture to all of the people surrounding everyone choosing a dish to bring. That's the whole reason for that originally. That's why it started, was the culture driving activity. So culture driving activities are ways to showcase inclusion. Another one that is really common also that I did still surprised I didn't hear this one either is sharing things about your family. Usually if I'm in my home office, I have the pictures of my kids on the wall and stuff, and they're not here today, but they're always with me. I got this amazing tattoo to always think about them because they're my two loves in the world. But so all of those things are things that can connect inclusion to other people, so usually food, family, those are pretty high on the list of potential common ground items that are safe, that usually you can navigate in that space to help drive that inclusion forward. So obviously we talked a lot about inclusion. I have some takeaways in addition to the food and the family. But here you go. Always think about what you are contributing and where your differences lie, but how you actually showcase inclusion by knowing what happens in your organization and the community where you live, because those things are always connected. So while someone may be in one city, someone may be in another city, but they have part of the same organization with the same structure and the same governance, but can have completely different lives and completely different rights sometimes, depending upon where people sit in the world. So just having that as a general awareness is going to help you drive and cultivate more inclusion. Know that impression that you're leaving, because that connects to that belonging. And then, like I mentioned, the speaking out against exclusions is extremely important, but really create that welcoming environment any way that you can to bring people in. I love the example that was given around going up and initiating the conversation for someone. We have introverts in the world and we have extroverts in the world. I'm sure that we'll talk about that more, but think about how you can make that person feel welcome, and that really will connect. Okay. Action number 2. So this empowering action of access is where we'll really dive into tools and resources. And access gives you the opportunity to connect by providing elements that can support someone's journey. Okay, so if you're wondering where equity lives and accessibility lives, it's right here in this action. The empowering action of access is that connected nature of providing resources and resource allocation of materials to drive change for people. Now, as you go through this access portal, okay, of accessing the material, know that how you use access and the language appropriated to it is really important. Even if that means that you think about languages more as something that changes, because language is one of those 10 differences that I teased at you at the beginning. It's one of those 10 differences because it is a groundbreaking difference into how people are connected to other humans, and it largely impacts how you showcase empowerment as well. I travel the world and speak about empowerment in a lot of different countries. Now, while I only know fluently one language, English, but I can speak portions of several other languages. Every day I try to learn something new, a new phrase or a new saying, and it shows me that I'm going to take access and language access as a way to actually drive empowerment for people. It's also belonging and respect that gets driven from you providing that access point, that you're at least interested in learning and growing that way. You've got to see like the amount of hosts, you'll get so much more respect when you showcase language access to someone who does not expect you to know any words in their language. That can be really groundbreaking, especially if you do global work. But how you drive access also connects to creating access for others. So I can't remember who this was, but it was someone just recently who just mentioned creating time on the calendar. Creating time on the calendar for someone is literally an easy way to show access. It was a great example. And yes, you could also show inclusion through that time. But remember, access is about a resource, and it connects to something that someone may not have. So if you have a specialty, which every single one of you in this meeting has a specialty awareness, think about how you can use that to impact someone else. And then you have to make yourself accessible as well. And that means you have to be open to learning something new. It means you also have to tie in and create access opportunities for people. Sometimes that can be just as simple as saying someone's name in the room when they're Ashley Brundage, right? Say someone's name in the room when they're not present and they're not talking, and mention them. And when you do that, what will happen is that person, then it will gain empowerment because you provided them the access to say your name. And that is this whole process that I've been talking about. That's how you do that. Now, do remember that each person, with all of their 10 differences, may need more strategic access to resources. This is why equity is so important. People talk about DEI, right? And a lot of times people are trying to push equity forward. Well, every time I've ever had a conversation with an executive about equity, they immediately only think about pay equity. But equity is much, much more than just pay equity. Yes, we want to have pay equity. That would be fantastic. But equity in its own right can apply to lots of things other than just pay. Okay, it applies to healthcare. It applies to resources in the community. It applies to everything under the sun. Okay, remember that equity is much, much more than pay equity. And how you contribute to an equitable environment is identifying where someone needs more strategic access to something. For example, if someone needs more time to contribute or complete an assignment, that's an example of you creating an equitable environment for them to do what's needed. For my neurodiverse friends, think about this. I have a neurodiversity. It's why my business is a disability-owned business enterprise. And ultimately, I function a little bit differently. And if I have the team and they know exactly what that is, and I have it, then I have equitable access to drive everything else that I need to do. And if I plan accordingly and I follow my plan, then I don't have any issues, and ultimately I'm able to be empowered. So remember that as you move throughout this, that different people require different strategic access. There's also some networking happening here in access. And if the pandemic taught us one thing, it definitely taught us the ability to go be in any city, anywhere in the world, just by clicking a button. All you had to do was join the Zoom room. And those Zoom meetings are still happening because a lot of organizations are just hybriding their stuff now. Before, we didn't do that. You could only access the event if you were there in person. But now, so many things are being recorded. Even this is being recorded, right? So this is an opportunity that you'll have to then share an empowerment workshop with someone. And then that actually provides me with more access and empowerment, right? You're then empowering me as an entrepreneur when you share information about someone's work. That's a perfect example. But also remember to use this networking opportunity that you have. Use it now. Share where you're from. Share where you're hailing from right now in the chat. It's a great way to do that. We can network. If you have a LinkedIn page, I highly recommend that you put the LinkedIn handle in the chat and use the HTTPS so people can connect with you, and you can grow your network sphere together. And then you all gain access to more empowerment because you have literally the ability then to say you have X amount of followers on the day before the event, and then now you have this many followers. It's a perfect example. And how you build that connection is through networking. So there are styles to do it, there are events to do it, and there are groups to do it. But definitely do it. Okay. Another thing that connects to access is how we provide sponsorship. And sponsorship is a lot different than mentorship. Mentorship is a whole other session. That's a whole other webinar. sponsorship is something I want that lives right in the area of strategic access. And providing access to people through sponsorship is a great way to build and cultivate relationships. It does not make a major time investment to sponsor someone. It also does not have to be a financial sponsorship. Yes, it could be, but it doesn't have to be. Okay, a sponsor, basically, as I mentioned earlier, they say your name when you're not present. You're giving a stamp of approval, basically, and saying that the message that's being shared is impactful. It does carry empowerment. So as you move throughout sponsors, know that the best way to cultivate a sponsor is by taking something off someone's plate. If you want the executive to be your sponsor, then you better come with some major taking things off someone's plate. Okay, that's what I did. I went to all of the bank regional presidents, and I would go whenever I was in a new city. I would go and introduce myself, and I would find out what they needed help with, or I would research it and figure it out on my own. And I have to tell you, there was this moment where we were building a playground, and I don't know if you've ever seen one of those playgrounds that gets built in a half day or a day, but it was a kaboom playground. And I found out that we only had 20 people signed up for the kaboom playground build. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to take this over and I'm going to bring a lot of people. And I'm also going to have them all wear the same shirt. So that way there was no confusion as to who brought the people to come and build the freaking playground. And so sure enough, we had 60 people show up to build the playground. 40 were all wearing the same shirts. And the bank president walks up to me and says, Ashley, I noticed that you're wearing the same shirt that all those other people were wearing. What was all of that about? And I'm so glad that they came. And I said, oh, that was, I saw that we needed help and we were never going to build a playground in one day with 20 people. So I brought the people necessary. I had access to them and I thought it would be a good thing to do. Of course, you know, there was a little bit of a hidden agenda on my half, right? Because I put it out there and I was very vocal about it. But at the end of the day, the regional president was blown away that I took the initiative and that I helped for what he needed help with, that he didn't even realize he needed help. Okay, so sometimes that leaders don't always know what they need help with. You might just offer your help or you might just do something. Another good example of this is realizing that while we don't all work in business development roles, everyone does business development. Don't forget that. So if you're in human resources or you're in technology or whatever it is that you do, maybe you don't actually generate revenue. Maybe you're seen as an expense to the organization. You still generate revenue. You can still make an introduction, and guess what? Then that increases your likelihood to cultivate another sponsor. All right, so the more sponsors you have, at the end of the day, you will win the race. How was I able to go from being a part-time bank teller to being the national vice president of DEI in 4 years? It was because I had more sponsors than everyone else. And I tracked the sponsors. I leveraged them when I needed the help and I asked for it. You do not usually get anything that you don't ask for in life. And that's why that's a big part of what makes access an empowering action. So at the end of the day, leverage your contacts, because it's the contacts where this world will live to drive empowerment for people. You have to create access for you, others, and then you have to remember that privilege plays into this. That's why the differences assessment and rating privilege or disprivilege will help you to decipher where you might have the most strategic access and then where you might be able to provide the most strategic access for somebody else. That makes access an empowering action. All right. So the question for you all is, what actual tools or resources do you have access to that can empower someone else? And let's put them in the chat. What you have access to, it could be something as simple as, you name it. So go ahead and do that. We're going to put those in the chat of what you have access to that can actually empower another human on the planet. Okay, so think about what that might be. And I see a good example in the chat, which is social media. That's a really good example. One of the things I love to do is when we're doing this, yes, money could be totally something, totally, yes. Voice, yes. Jobs, yes, here we go. Education, TSG platform. Yeah, these are all good examples of things that you have access to. Think about what treasured resources you have access to and how they can drive empowerment for someone else, and then you'll have this. Well, and oh, I was saying the social media. So one of the things I love to do during these webinars is tell people, okay, type in Black Trans Lives Matter on social media, use that hashtag and follow the first 10 people that you see. And then you'll amplify Black transgender lives, because let me just tell you, like, they are facing not only transphobia, but they're also facing racism and sexism at the same time. It's a triple threat of, and that's literally why trans women of color are actually being murdered at a 95% commensurate rate in comparison to white transgender people. So just remember that that's actually like literally happening in this world right now. All right, so that's access. I have some access takeaways for you all. Obviously, make yourself accessible. If I didn't hit that enough, I'm definitely hitting it again. Create those networking opportunities, because your opportunity to grow and expand your network is exactly something you have access to. Practice sponsorship. You have to sponsor people. Regardless of your level in the organization, you can sponsor someone and you can impact them through sponsorship, and then use those contacts that you have for access needs for yourself or for others, but try to do it for others, because too much, we don't want to do too much self-empowerment. That may move us in a not so good space. So we want to make sure that there's a fine line there. All right. So empower is our next one. This is our last empowering action, and of course, my graphic designer designed well, I guess he designed a character of me. And I'm not wearing a cape today, but I did happen to wear a cape on Monday, and everybody was like, "Hey, that looks like that color, that image from your book." I was like, "Yeah, it is. But it's not really. It's not me." But anyways. So empower is an action as well, of course, as the overarching framework of utilizing empowerment. But let's break down empowerment. Let's do a little bit of, do I have any, I almost feel like that I need the operation, right, where we're going to dissect something. We're dissecting empowerment. So the definition of empowerment is authority and power connected to people. I didn't write it, I just read it, but then I decided to study it. So what is authority? Well, it definitely is a boss-like mentality. It's being the boss of your own life. It's you gain the confidence to want to fight for more. It's how you move in the world around your own being in existence. It's everything that you learn and grow through in your journey, in your lived experiences. It's all the things that contribute to you and your mind. Because sometimes the mind puts up a barrier or a blockade that stops us from doing things. And in fact, usually that's more so common. We put our own barriers into what we can and can't do. There are enough systematic barriers, like the glass ceiling lives in authority. Okay, so breaking the glass ceiling is exactly an authority bucket portion of empowerment. And remember that all of the things that drive your authority connect to humanistic kind of things, humanistic elements. It's your heart set, it's your mindset, it's your meditation session, it's all the things that you do to build yourself up around confidence. All of those things drive authority for empowerment. And then on the flip side, we have power. And yes, it very well could be the power icon on your phone. It could be some sort of monetary instrument, a debit card. Your phone is a monetary instrument these days, right? It could be currency. It could be lots of things that relate to the power, but it could be the most powerful thing there is, and that is time. Because time also is a power resource that holds the keys to more empowerment. But it's way deeper than all three of these things. It's what do they all have in common? They all are trackable and measurable. That's where empowerment lives, is understanding the delineation difference between the power part of empowerment, which is the treasured, measured resource or tracked metric, unit of measure, something that impacts business at the end of the day. Then there's the authority side. And when you dissect empowerment in this way, you start realizing that you can identify what the empowerment is that's being driven from all the things that you do in your day-to-day activities. And that would be the app of empowerment. The app of empowerment moves every single day. It does not require you to have access to internet. It does not require you to do a download. It moves every single second in every single moment it's happening. It's the authority, it's the power, and then it's the people that you connect it to in the middle. And that's the app. That's the app of empowerment. And as you start thinking about all the actions that you do and how you are going to need to empower yourself in some capacity sometimes, especially if your differences live on a disprivileged meter, you're going to need probably a lot more self-empowerment than maybe somebody who's on a different matter, right? Well, as far as the continuum of privilege versus disprivilege, know that you need to empower others. And then you can also empower organizations through the people in the organization. Now, an organization can't technically empower someone, but people in the organization can, and the reverse holds true as well. And as you work to drive empowerment for people through your organizations, think about how you can impact them, but identify the authority and the power item that's being driven through the action that you have done to connect to a person. That is empowering actions, and that's what builds that connection. So what we want to do as we're getting ready for our last activity here before we open up for questions. So if you have questions, start thinking about what those are, because we will love to dive into those. But first thing is to remember that the differences portion of empowering differences, we have to reframe the authority bucket of empowerment around what makes us different. And leveraging differences as an advantage is the central core of empowering differences. If you are a white, straight male and you're thinking, wow, I don't have a lot of differences. Well, actually, you have all 10 of the differences. Guess what? All 7 billion different people on this planet all have a race, an ethnicity, a religion or lack thereof, an age, a physical ability, an educational background, a language, all of the things that make you up who you are. You have a gender, you have all of these things. You have a race, you have that, you have all of them. And knowing that you have them will then give you the opportunity to drive empowerment through self or for another human. And that is it. You can't even see that as a weakness, because sometimes that's probably the biggest question that I get a lot is surrounding where do allies play in this role of empowering differences. It's right here. It's this opportunity to center around this. Sometimes they see that as a weakness, and it's actually their biggest strength, is to hold on to the measured treasured resources that they have surrounding the power or the authority items. And whatever that weakness is, know that all your differences bring value, but know what the value is. If you want to know why I got a bank to hire me and then move me up in that level that fast, it was because I shared empowering data. Here's your empowering data. It is Pride Month, so it's the best time to share with you the LGBTQ plus business economic study. And I'll tell you that the economic study shows that there's $1.7 trillion buying power of the LGBT businesses, just the businesses, okay? $1.7 trillion, that's the 10th largest economy in the world, even bigger than Russia, just to put that one out there, okay? Have the statistic and the data for which community you're driving the empowerment for, which difference you're empowering, and speak to it. So if I'm going to be talking about my status as someone that's Jewish, I'm going to come with the Jewish economic statistic, and I'm going to talk about the buying power of the Jewish community. And then I'm going to be empowering that difference. So you can empower any difference that you want. You can even empower what school you went to. Okay, it's a concept that you can use to drive impact through data, but know the power number of the data. The data matters. Can't not have the data. If you don't have the data, then you need to create the data. So I decided to host and create a trans business inclusion program for the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce. And I did a social inventory of the United States population. And I wanted to know how many trans entrepreneurs there were that had their business certified. Because I wanted to impact and grow the number, whatever the number was, I wanted to grow it. Well, what do you think the number was? Is the question I have for you all. Which we can totally do as, oh, here we go, we have a poll. Voila, what do you think the number was? In 2018, when I started the TGX initiative, well, this is what prompted me to start the TGX initiative. There were 1,200 LGBT businesses in the country at that time that were certified. And what number was TGX? Transgender Expansive is the acronym for TGX, in case you were wondering. All right, so what do we think? We got a survey result here and see what you all think. But so I built a program, and I'll start talking, and then we'll see what the results are. But so I built this program to impact others and to be able to showcase that there were more TGX entrepreneurs out there. So we built a mentorship program. I built a sponsorship program. I raised almost $125,000 to cover up the cost. And it looks like 26 is the winning answer. Yes, and it is the right answer. There were only 26 businesses in the whole US that were certified that were TGX. So this program I built, and then we started sponsoring trans events and trans-led organizations, and we put a booth and we started recruiting new members. Well, you can't do empowerment work and then not poll the audience at the beginning and then poll them at the end to know what the impact was. This is literally why empowerment matters, because of the data. You can't have empowerment without the data. So let's launch the other poll now that we have a TGX initiative program. And let's see what you all think of how many certified businesses there are that are TGX in America today. from these choices. Let's see what you think. But this work, this economic empowerment work, led me to build a program like that for 5 other countries now. To give you an idea, I'm the Minister of Empowerment for Out Britain and Out Scotland, building an economic empowerment program there. There's a reason that empowerment is so important. It's because you have to track the numbers associated with your empowering work. So if you're here and you're launching one of the new employee groups, the Pride or the Differing Ability group, I want you to think about how you're going to track empowerment through your volunteerism there, because it's important that you can encapsulate what it is that you're doing. Because if you're just showing up, that's great, but make sure you show up with empowerment in mind, because that's where you want to be. All right, so do we have the poll results of what everyone thinks the answer is on this one? So it looks like the majority said 200, but 400 was the answer. So, you had to guess the most empowering answer of all those. But another organization that I track empowerment results through is GLAD, and Missy mentioned that I'm the vice chair of the board of directors for GLAD. Well, we do empowerment work. We track the attendees. We hold people accountable, accountability and representation around how we track all the studios and all the films and all the television shows that they produce. And we track how many LGBTQ plus characters are featured in those films. So there's lots of accountability. Empowerment is accountability. Okay, it's important to remember that. All right, and let's talk about this impact and results that you can do to track empowerment. So go ahead and go to the chat box and share what it is that you can track empowerment in our daily lives. How are you going to track empowerment? Because I can tell you, you have to do a number check. If it doesn't contain numbers, then it might not have as much power as you thought it did. All right, so let's see what you all are thinking around that and how you're going to track empowerment. All right. So I saw that I haven't seen any chat come through yet, but oh, the types of businesses we're buying from. Ooh, I think that's almost like a double entendre there, right? Because that could also mean supplier diversity too, that you could track. That would be great. Ooh, I love this one. Retention promotion rates are perfect. I think that's a good teaser for my potential additional lists that I have for you all, right? This is where authority and where power live. It's right here. I mean, this is just some examples, but yes, career progression, personal progression, leadership development, promotions, definitely, as mentioned, confidence. You could track confidence with an employee engagement survey, right? Around how people feel. That's a good example. You can also track all kinds of other things surrounding power items are a lot easier to track, right? Power items around what people get paid, how much business results were driven, all of those things, the community impacts, donations to community-based organizations, the time, right? That time, that roundabout ticking clock that's happening. All of those things, business contracts, P&L statement, RFP, RFQ, all of those things can have empowerment, but people also is a trackable metric for power and empowerment. All of these things can drive impacts to other people on the planet, so keep that in mind. All right, so I have some action steps for this last empowering action of empower. So the self-assessment that was dropped on you really early on, what I'd like to tell you about that a little bit deeper here is that I want you to look at that through your own self-empowerment lens of answering these questions. But ultimately what's being driven by asking you those questions. And then guess what? If you happen to get a copy of my workbook, you'll notice that I'm going to ask you the same questions at the end of your empowerment journey, or whenever you think you've reached an empowerment milestone. There's a reason for that, because what is ultimately being driven through this program is self-actualization. Self-actualization is where all of the confidence framing lives for building up the empowerment in your life. That's the nature at which you will access your empowerment journey and being able to write it down and memorialize it. Okay, please do that. Track the results from all the empowerment work. If you haven't figured that one out, that the numbers really matter, they really matter. And then practice all of the empowering actions, not just empower, but mix empowerment with all of them. And then create your own empowerment audit, which is, of course, the app for your life. If you take one thing away from our presentation today, hopefully you'll remember that app and how easy it is to use the app that does not require internet access or phones to leverage. As you're moving through our time together, I hope you've been saving your questions, because the question portion is coming up, but we recap the 4 empowerment steps here in just a second. And then we talked about the empowering actions of empower, access, and inclusion. We had a goal about connecting this all to leadership, and I hope you saw how all of these are leadership actions. This is why empowering differences is a leadership model, because it's a way to impact other humans through empowerment. And then I'm going to leave you with the 4 empowerment steps to remember in case you missed your chance to download the self-assessment. It's right here. Your opportunity to know yourself is step 1. Step 2 is to know others. That's where you'll learn about differences. You'll learn about intersectionality and privilege when you go on that journey of learning about others. The good way and the good tool for that also is to read my book. That's a good space for the book, is learning about others, because it does feature my empowerment panel in the book. The empowerment panel I mentioned on the differences, they're all, most of them are all guest contributors in the book. So you get to hear how they use the empowering actions as well. Then there's also that strategy, which my workbook really supports the development of your strategy. And that helps you to decipher which differences to empower in which setting, because you don't want to necessarily get pigeonholed. So in order to prevent yourself from being pigeonholed, you have to make sure that you have the strategy right for your empowerment journey. And then you strategize the actions through prioritization of which ones are going to impact you faster. Your list of the 10 empowering actions that you're going to connect to your app of empowerment all are prioritized differently based on your own makeup. So it's important to decipher what that is and what your order of prioritization is for the 10 actions. So I built a animated, there's more animation of me. So that's a little clip from my online learning platform. So if you really want to dive into these 10 actions, I have a whole entire workshop kit that you can download, and you get all the empowerment kit together. And you can do that right on my website at empoweringdifferences.com. And I created a special coupon code that you can use as TSG. I don't think caps matter on that, so I don't think it matters either way. And that will save you 25% on anything that you happen to grab for your empowerment resources. But wow, I feel like I'm on time, Missy. Am I on time? I say 15 minutes, right?
You did awesome. We're right on time. That was a lot of great information that we got to receive in the last hour or so. So we have about 15 minutes for questions, and I know.
And we have a poll, right, too?
Yes, we do have a poll to make sure that we're measuring our data and seeing.
There we go.
Yes.
I'm getting water while we're marinating on the questions. And everyone takes the empowerment knowledge level poll here.
Definitely seeing an increase in knowledge. About
Okay.
at a good bit of knowledge. One person an expert, so they were definitely paying attention.
I didn't respond to the poll, okay, because I didn't want to taint your results. So my contact info is on the screen. So if anybody wants to connect with me, you can find me at Ashley T Brundage on all the social channels, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. It's all at Ashley T Brundage is my handle. But I'm super thrilled to take us to the questions. Right, we're gonna do some questions, right?
Yeah, we'll open it up for questions. And I did want to also know something Ashley shared with me. If you're interested in her book, if you buy it from her website versus Amazon, you will get a personalized message from Ashley on empowerment. So definitely go to her website if you're interested in checking out that book.
Awesome, thanks. We're gonna empower Ashley versus Jeff Bezos, basically.
Yes.
Oh boy.
To Lee Wallace's point, that's diversity spend.
Yes, that too. Awesome.
All right, well, if anyone has any questions, you can drop it in the chat or take yourself off mute. I could kick us off with a question. You referenced this earlier today regarding extroverts versus introverts and how empowerment is more of an extroverted trait. Can you talk to us a little bit how that can show up in introverts as well and how to generate empowerment?
Thanks so much for asking. Yeah, this is definitely a big thing because a lot of people will they message me, they're like, Ashley, empowerment worked for you. I don't know that it's going to work for me. Well, actually, there's a lot of different ways to drive empowerment. If you're silent about what you do, you can use technology, use whatever it is that you're good at to drive the impact and influence other people. Social media obviously is a way of doing that, but sometimes it could be just as simple as finding somebody who's really influential in an organization and maybe one-on-one you share your story of what it's like to be an introvert in an organization and share that. And then guess what? What you'll have done is you'll have been sharing information that is going to then drive empowerment for that person. And then they're going to end up being your extrovert. You almost have to kind of pair yourself because the world moves really quickly sometimes, and I know some introverts that force themselves to kind of put themselves out there at times, and then it causes mental anguish. It causes other things, and then the authority bucket, right, is suffering. So remember the delineation between the two of the authority bucket versus the power bucket. Well, the power bucket is all metrics and numbers. So if you're an introvert, you need to study the numbers and you need to come with that data when you do go to share that information. And when you make that and you come out of your comfort zone, but maybe you share it in an email, or maybe you don't share it like me on a live event in front of a bunch of people, right? But maybe you do it in whatever way that you can do it. But what I'm telling you right now is that if you are an introvert and you're not going to be the megaphone person, you better have the numbers and the metrics and the data that speak for you.
Thank you for sharing that. That was really informative and definitely some good takeaways there.
All right, so what's next?
Let's see, we have a question in the chat. What is one thing, the top action item or characteristic you wish you could instill in every business or employee that you think we could help implement?
Definitely the tracking of the empowerment work. I mean, that's literally kind of why that was the first thing that we did, and then the back end thing that we did, and then why I showed you example of empowerment work and tracking that. So and I kind of hinted at this too, but the employee groups are so important in providing that safe space for people. And then also at the same time, providing the opportunity for allies to learn about that intersectional group and those differences. So in that environment though, there's lots of opportunity to track the empowerment through the employee group. And if I could say one thing, the thing that you should do, you should track the time spent and track how many people are involved and track the numbers related to the power portion of the employee group. It's going to have the largest impact in gaining more funding for the employee group. It's going to, because trust me, when you come at them and you say, this is how much impact we've had on retention. This is the impact we've had on career progression for our group. This is the impact that we've had on, right? And you can say that when you come with that information to Missy and you say, hey, by the way, we also want this. And here's the reason why. You're going to be a lot easier to get to a yes, right, Missy? I don't know. I'm just thinking.
Yeah, no, this is just like super real for us. And I can tell that your former leadership training's really coming out, because I see it in my colleague Lee Wallace all the time. She was a former trainer and y'all are speaking the same language. So this is awesome.
I love it. Okay.
Tim put a question in the chat. What's a good way to start an ERG? We don't have any currently.
Oh, yeah. So I think there's a lot of different ways that can happen. I would say grassroots is typically how I see most of them start, where employees gather and they kind of galvanize and they know each other, and it's usually of that same difference. I've started LGBTQ+ employee resource groups like that in an organization where, you know, we said, hey, you know, and I'm kind of, because I have that extrovert skills, which I didn't used to have the extrovert skills, by the way. For anyone that knows me before I transitioned, that was only after. But get to know everybody and then knock on doors. But really, you almost kind of have to do grassroots. When I was running DEI programming at PNC, we had a 50. We wanted there to be 50 employees that were on an interest list for an ERG group. We've institutionalized the starting of ERG chapters because we had to build a process for it, especially because we were giving each one a budget. And so then it had to have a business system in mind to it. But if it's early on, and it's just, it really also depends on the company size too, right? Because, right, that's a 50 is a very small subset of a company that had 60,000 employees, right? So that's a little different. So it really depends on company size as well as to how grassroots you have to get. But definitely, I think grassroots, and then also kind of once you have the people, then start identifying leadership in that group would be another good thing that I would recommend you do. And then lastly, I would then find the executive to pay for it. Because if you don't have any money, right? I mean, yes, you can drive empowerment without money, but there's only so much you can do without other resources. You'd have to have a whole lot of other resources to make up for that, not having the money part.
Thank you. That's great information, Ashley. And Tim, I'd love to connect with you after the call. Select Group has just created ERGs within the last year, and we're evolving the same process that Ashley just really rolled out, so we could share there. And we're very grateful for our executive sponsor who's on the call, Tom Whiteley, where we get our money from. So thanks for being here. Awesome.
Money well spent.
Yeah. What other questions? Oh,
All right, Missy, it's your turn. You got another one.
yep, I can definitely ask one more question. I know we're coming up on time, but I'd love to utilize every minute. So Ashley, with all the work that you've been doing and all the, different events that you've had this month and throughout the year, I really found that this workshop for me personally has been the most very educational, but also the most action oriented, with like clear objectives of like what you can do and implement right now in your life or in your community or at work, which is just awesome. I think doing this work at the select group, that's a lot of the feedback that we get is, how do we really implement this? I'm understanding, I'm doing the self-awareness, I'm learning about myself, learning about others, but how do I really put this into play? So this has been awesome, because I just think you really outlined it very clearly on what steps you can take to make a change. But how do you help leaders create that stickiness, or employees where, we're all like fired up right now. We have some action items that we can take, empowerment on, but how do we create that stickiness and, hold people accountable weeks after this session where maybe it's, died down a little bit?
Okay, so, well, actually, I have a product for that, but that's my leadership development program, because it connects the actions more than just Pride Month, right? It's, I mean, I kind of jokingly say it's Pride 365, but it's not just about Pride, right? It's about all the differences, not just that. Obviously, I do a lot of business during Pride Month, but empowering your differences is something that everyone can do every single day, right? Regardless of where you are, regardless of what you do, regardless of your identities. And honestly, to tell you the truth, like this whole program that I was building, it started as a transgender empowerment program. And then I was like, wait a minute. When I got to step 2, no others, that's when the light bulb went off, and I said, this is a bigger thing for all people. And I did the research, and I brought in the other group members, and I built the empowerment panel who did the research with me, because I wanted it to be bigger than that. And so that's kind of what led that. But what I do for groups is I lead them through a cohort, and I give them a syllabus, and we address it across as long as we need to. But typically for most organizations, it's either 3, 6, or 10 months. And we focus on the actions. And yes, like the presentation says, and the action steps and the takeaways, but it's dialogue sessions specifically tied to each of those 10 empowering actions is how my framework works. And I do that as a leader cohort for groups of people, for organizations.
Awesome. Thank you. It's really good stuff that you're doing, and a great way to close it out. And I had asked Ashley earlier this week on, what she needs from TSG, and she just said support. So definitely follow Ashley on LinkedIn. I dropped her URL in the chat. Also on social media, you can find her. Check out her website. There's so much great information out there, and she's literally all over the world. So definitely connect with her on LinkedIn and see all the good stuff she's doing. She was just in an article in Business Insider talking about the community and different things going on that are really hurting the transgender community right now. So follow her, check her out. She's doing amazing work. We appreciate you so much for being here. Happy Pride Month, everybody. We'll send out the recorded session after this, and have a great day. Thanks, everybody.